Hello friends, it's 10:30 a.m. and usually I would be working on my PhD right now, but I just received a very exciting email and I had to tell you about it. If you're new to the channel, my name is Morgan. I'm doing a PhD in theater and performance studies, but I also love to read in my spare time. Reading fiction is actually a habit that I lost when I went into undergrad because reading became a chore that I had to do for school, for grades. It wasn't something that I could just do for fun to relax anymore. But then during the pandemic, reading once again became a way for me to relax and reduce stress in my life, and I have maintained that habit. And in 2022, I read more books than I ever have in any year prior. And the email that I received this morning contains all of the data analysis of my reading stats for 2022. So my brother, pictured here, is a data analyst and an Excel wizard. He has an Etsy shop where he has different Excel spreadsheets that you can interact with, like project planning ones, for instance, his Gantt chart, as well as a writing tracker that he made for me when I was doing NaNoWriMo, but you can purchase for like very cheap on his site if you'd like somewhere to track your writing. But he also does custom orders and all of his prices are very reasonable. So if you ever have an Excel need that you cannot fulfill yourself, because Excel is just like an amazing skill that maybe everybody should have, but we don't all have it, then you can absolutely reach out to him on Etsy. I will leave the link to his Etsy shop below. What I asked of him last year though is to receive all of my like raw data of reading and turn it into like pretty charts that I could interact with and learn more about my reading life in 2022. And I'm so excited to see what he came up with. Before we get into that though, let me show you what just the data I sent him looked like. Over here you'll see my Obsidian, and in every case for every book that I read this year, I would type in the title and the author when I started reading it, and then when I was done, I would put in the star count, the format in which I read it, the page count, the date that I finished reading it, and the genre or genres that it fell within. And me and my brother David have gone over a couple more stats that I could include in my 2023 reading year. For instance, the start date, so that I can know how long it took me to read each book, and you know, if I take longer to read certain types of books than others, as well as the original language that the book was written in, because I love translated fiction and I really want to read more of that, as well as maybe the country that the book was published originally in, and the publication year, so I can see how old the reads are that I'm reading. For now though, I tracked what I tracked in 2022, and he sent me a bunch of pretty graphs, I hope, that analyze my reading data from 2022. So I haven't even looked at this yet. He just sent it over. We're gonna look at it together and see what my reading year looked like. I'm gonna be looking at my computer over here as I interact with the graphs, but I will pop up the graph that I'm talking about on the other side of the screen so that you can see as well. All right, let's open this up. There it is. 2022 reading XLSX. Morgan EUA's 2022 reading summary highlights. A quick overview. In total, I read 51 books this year. I think I said previously my goal was 52, and I told you that I was definitely going to reach that goal. I think there were a couple things I thought I would finish before the end of the year. There were short, like poetry collections, and I didn't end up finishing those, so I only reached 51, but this year my reading goal will be higher. Pages read, 14,309. That doesn't really mean anything to me, but I think the page counts are going to come in handy later on. The average length of a book that I read was 280 pages. I think that sounds like an average book's length. Average rating. So this is out of 6 because really my rating system is out of 5, but then sometimes a book will absolutely blow me away and I will give it 6 stars. So I didn't give David that information, so he just realized that my rating system was out of 6 for some reason and made it out of 6 here. The average rating I gave a book is 3.9 out of 6. So when you think about that out of 6, it seems kind of low, but if you think about that out of 5, that's almost a 4 out of 5. So I was liking the books that I read. I read 38 fiction, 9 nonfiction, and 4 academic. I will say the academic titles, it looks like I'm barely reading any academic work even though I'm doing a PhD, but I am reading lots of academic texts. It's just I only include books that I have like started and finished in 2022 on this list, and I don't always finish the whole book, and obviously articles aren't included in this. So there were 4 academic titles that I actually like finished an entire book, read the entire book. I didn't just skim it. I didn't just read it for the introduction or a specific chapter. I actually read it front to back. My reading this year fell into 28 unique genres, but overall there were 89 genres that I assigned books to. So even though I read 51 books, over 51 books, there were 89 genres. So I'm reading a lot of like books that don't fall neatly into a single genre. Now I'm very excited to see what sort of analysis he did on this data, like what sort of graphs we're going to be looking at. I think I'm actually going to pull my microphone over here and look directly at the screen because like I'm very excited to see what this is, but I'll keep putting stuff over there for you as well. First section, how you read. What format and platform you read on. Okay. So format, we've got audio, ebook, and print are the main formats. But then within print, we also have books that I borrowed from people, books that I got from the library, and books that I already owned. And I'm already seeing the books that I owned far surpasses the library and borrowed print books together, which is incredible. I'm actually blown away that 62% of my print book reading comes from books that I already owned, or that also could be books that I bought and then read. I just know that a lot of people on BookTube have problems with reading the books that are actually on their shelves, so the fact that I do that, the fact that I read 18 books from my shelves, is incredible. I still look at my bookshelves and I'm like, oh my god, I haven't even read half of these books, but you know, clearly I'm making my way through that list, so that's great. And then I only read 4 books on ebook this year. I did buy my Kobo this year, I think in the summer, so then I only had half a year to read on it. I don't really like reading ebooks on my phone because it's like too tiny and I want to like reduce my screen time. I don't want to increase it by like reading books for hours on there. So I got the Kobo, which has the e-ink. So I think it should probably be a goal for 2023 to read more on my Kobo because it's like so accessible, so easy to carry around. And then I'm not cluttering up my house more with putting more books on my shelves. And then audio, I listened to all of my audiobooks on Scribd, and fascinatingly, I listened to 18 audiobooks. So 35% of my reading was on audio, which makes a lot of sense. Like, audio is a really good way to increase the amount that you read because you can do it like while you're running, while you're doing the dishes, while you're doing laundry, while you're just like walking around. Like, you can always be listening to an audiobook, basically. You can always be reading if you want to be. So I should probably try to do more of that this year as well. My prediction for 2023 is that the audiobooks will remain at about 35% of my reading, but the amount of audiobooks will increase because I'm hoping my overall reading increases. The next section here says how you read each category. In audio, how much was I reading academic versus fiction versus nonfiction type books? So in audio, 82% was fiction, which makes a lot of sense because I find it really hard to focus on an audiobook. Like, when I choose to listen to a book as an audiobook, it's because I don't care if I hear every single word of what is said, because I might be out running and so I need to be paying attention to what's going on. So I need to choose a book to listen to on audio that it's okay if I don't catch everything. And that's mostly going to be fiction books I don't really care about. But sometimes there's like a fluffy nonfiction. And actually the nonfiction I listened to on audio, at least one of them was The Innovators by Walter Isaacson. And that was a nice, easy biography style read to listen to on audio. Ebooks. So again, no academic ebooks, which some years I do read on my Kindle app on my iPad, and that can be good for academic books. Fiction makes up most of my ebook reading experience, that makes sense. And there were only 4 ebooks. And then print. Of course, 9% was academic. I only read academic books in print. Fiction was 69% and nonfiction was 21%. So honestly, fiction is kind of even across the board for taking up about 70 to 80% of my reading in each format. Oh man, this is gonna be a long video. I'm like not even halfway through these things that he's given me. The next section is my favorite reads. Oh, exciting. Okay. My top 2 books, of course, were the ones that I rated 6 stars that blew me away, that went above and beyond. They were Stylish Academic Writing by Helen Sword and Daring Greatly by Brené Brown, which you will already know. Daring Greatly was my top book of the entire year. If you watched my previous video, if not, spoiler alert, Daring Greatly was my favorite read last year. My favorite category, my favorite type of book was, interestingly, nonfiction. I guess that has to do with the fact that Stylish Academic Writing and Daring Greatly were both 6-star reads, and I didn't rate any fiction as a 6-star read. I guess, like in my life, nonfiction has more of an opportunity to be transformative for me. I definitely, prior to the pandemic, almost only read nonfiction. I really enjoy nonfiction. I want to write nonfiction one day. So I guess it makes sense that I preferred the nonfiction reads that I read. Fiction's not far away at 3.9 average rating, and then academic at 3.3, which honestly makes sense. For the most part, I read academic reads because I think they'll be useful to my dissertation, not because like I'm really drawn to them and I think they're going to be excellent works of writing, unfortunately. What quality of book each format delivered? I feel like hypothetically a book shouldn't be better because I listened to it in audio or ebook or print, but let's see what this says. Ebook 4.3, print 4.1, and then audio way down to 3.5 rating. Honestly, what that reflects is how I use each format. I'm a little bit surprised that ebook was higher than print because oftentimes I'm reading print that I own, and you'd think that I like the books that I own the best because I purchased them as a physical copy, but this is not reflecting that. Although I did only read 4 ebooks, so maybe I just need more data. But the thing that does make sense is audio. The way that I use audio, as I mentioned earlier, is that I listen to the books that I think I'm going to like the least, even though I still want to read them. What quality of book print platforms delivered? Okay, we're breaking it down into the print. So I borrowed books from the library, I borrowed books from people, and I owned some of the print books. The library comes in quite high here, almost a full star above the books that I owned and the books that I borrowed. The books that I like the best are the books that I'm borrowing from the library. I don't know what that means. Like, what is that? Does that mean I should borrow more books from the library? Is it the experience of taking it out of the library and having to return it that I like? Or is it something about the books that I choose when I'm at the library? I mean, I do have a good experience reading books from the library because like I get to essentially go book shopping, which I love doing, and like getting a new book and taking it home with me, which is so lovely, but then it also has that pressure of I have to return it. So I actually have to read the book that I took home, as opposed to the books that I own. I never have to read them. They're always gonna be there. So even if I buy a book because I know I'm gonna love it, I might not read it. Whereas I might borrow a book from the library because I know I'm gonna love it, and then I do have to read it. So maybe this makes sense. I think this really means that I need to borrow more books from the library. Books I borrowed from other people were the ones I liked the least, but that's not really representative of anything because I borrowed 3 books from other people this year, 2 of which were Generation X and Tortilla Flat, which I borrowed from my mom for a video, and while I liked Tortilla Flat okay, I did not like Generation X, so that's kind of skewed, I think, the rating there. I would say I should try borrowing more books from other people to increase the statistic this year, but borrowing books from other people comes along with all other sorts of stress about trying to return it and trying to keep it in a nice quality and etc. So we'll see about that. My top read author makes sense, Andrea Stewart, because I read The Bone Shard Daughter and The Bone Shard Emperor both this year. If she had come out with the 3rd book in the trilogy this year, I would have read 3 books by Andrea Stewart. I don't think this means that she's my favorite author, it just means that I read her trilogy this year and I didn't actually read any multiple books from any other trilogies or series this year. And then we have a graph. Let's try to understand this graph together. On the left is books, on the right is pages, on the bottom is star count, and then the red bars are corresponding to the number of books, and the purple line is corresponding to the pages in the book. So it's clear already to me that 4 stars is what I rated more books, and my average rating was a 3.9, so that makes sense. And I read more 5 stars than 3 stars, that's nice, but I did read more 2 stars than 6 stars. What can you do? There's probably more bad books in the world than there are incredible books in the world, unfortunately. But what's really interesting is this pages per book. So my 2-star reads tended to be quite short, under 200 pages, but then it increases until it peaks around my 5-star reads, which tended to be closer to 300 or 350, which means that I like longer books to a point, but then my absolute favorite books tended to be under 250 pages. So that's telling me I should read more books over 300 pages because those are the ones I'm giving a 5 stars to. All right, on to the next chart. What I read. This is about genres, so all genres by total mentions. My top genre was literary fiction. Obviously, all of those were fiction. Second highest was LGBTQ fiction, and that has less to do with the genre of the story and more to do with some of the content in the story. But that's interesting. I mean, out of 51 books, only about 9 had LGBTQ representation, so I don't know how great that is, but 7 were translated. It will be cool next year to have like the language that they were translated from as well as the country they were published in, but 7 translated works. 4 books about writing. Oh, I wonder if I made how to write a thesis about writing. I should have. 3 weird fictions. I know The Vegetarian is one of those books. I'll try to put the other 2 over here as well. What was weird this year? The Seep. That was a weird one. That's probably, probably called that weird. In 2023, I also want to be more like structured in the genres that I am choosing from and actually reporting on all of the genres that were in the book so that this whole section is more accurate, because I find it super interesting to see what I think I like versus what I actually end up reading. 2 memoirs. I did start a few other memoirs this year, but I didn't finish them, so maybe those will appear in 2023. I know that I need to read more nonfiction in 2023 since that I seem to like them more. 2 historical fiction, only 2 classics. That's probably something I could correct this year. Only 2 dark academia. I thought I read more than that. I think I should have called more things dark academia than I did. Like, for instance, you could call Pure Nisi dark academia, but I'm pretty sure I didn't call it dark academia. So I think next year I want to like just genre the heck out of my reading stats. That's also useful if I then go to like make a video. Say I make a dark academia book recommendations video. If I have labeled those correctly, it'll be so much easier to look back and be like, what are all the dark academia reads I've read? So better reporting, that's what I'm learning. And then all these other ones I really only read 1 book from. Okay, second last section. How long are the books that I am reading? The majority of the books are 200 to 250 pages. I did read a book that was over 650 pages, which I'm pretty sure is The Name of the Wind. And on general, I think like the fantasy books that I read are longer because I think The Bone Shard Emperor is over 500 pages. I mean, this year, if I read something like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, that's gonna be just a huge read. And we now know that I like longer reads, so I should make a concerted effort to pick up some longer books, even though they are more intimidating. And then finally, when I read. Clearly, August is my best month. I read 9 books in August. Second best was April, which was 7 books. I don't know why. I read 2 nonfiction in April, though. Wow, that's like a lot considering how few nonfiction I read. July, I read 3 nonfiction for a total of 6, my 3rd best month. And then we have March, and then we have September. Oh no, December. December I read 6 as well, which makes sense because the end of the year is like a scramble to try to get all your reads in. And then 5 in January, I guess also because I'm like excited to fulfill these New Year's resolutions, these new reading goals. I'm kind of slacking on January reading so far this year. It's the 13th of January and I haven't finished a single book, but I'm partway through at least 4 books, so 5 maybe. So maybe I will meet that number this year of 5 reads in January. Maybe I can even surpass it. And then we have a couple months where I only read 1 book, or I only finished 1 book. I might have been reading other books, we don't know, because I didn't track the start date of my reads. But in June, October, and November, I only read 1 book, which is interesting because I feel like in 2021, I read a lot of books in June, but because I wasn't tracking all of these stats prior to 2022, I just don't know that. So next year is going to be super interesting because I can give my brother all of my 2023 stats, but then also he already has my 2022 stats, so we can also do a compare and contrast sort of thing. So this video has already been very long, and next year, it's only going to be longer. Anyway, that is it for my 2022 reading stats. I don't know if that was enjoyable to you. I had a great time. This is very interesting to me. I have some key takeaways. Read longer books, borrow more books from the library, read more nonfiction, read more on my Kobo, track more statistics for each book, list every genre that a book might fall into. As my brother said, the more stats that I give him, the more interesting this is going to be, so challenge accepted. And this is my final kind of 2022 wrap-up video, so I will see you all in another video soon for more 2023 content. And for all of your Excel spreadsheet needs, contact my brother via Etsy at the link below. And actually, I should mention, if you want to support my channel as we head into 2023, I have activated the super thanks button on YouTube videos, so if you liked this video, not only can you like it and subscribe to my channel, but you can also hit that super thanks button and tip me for the video. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will see you in another video soon.